Hello everyone! In this video, I'll be sharing my first attempt at making 100% handmade spring rolls, or 手工春卷. Now, I will warn in advance that making your own dough from scratch is a time-consuming process that can be quite arduous. So, if you prefer, you can buy the pre-made pastries that I just showed. However, we're going to make this from scratch today. I've got 190 grams of all-purpose flour, 10 grams of cornstarch, 5 grams of salt, to which I'm going to gradually add about 140 to 150 milliliters of water. I recommend using a kitchen scale to measure the quantities, as using cup measurements may not be as precise. We'll incorporate the water into the dough until it forms a nice smooth ball. It will initially stick to your hand since the hydration ratio is high at about 70 to 75%, but just be patient and the ball will eventually form. We'll now proceed to chop our vegetables. Today I've chosen to keep things extremely simple and chop up some cabbage, carrots, and spring onions and leeks, ignoring garlic or ginger, as well as meat. If you would like to taste garlic or ginger, go ahead and add those in. Some people like to add chicken, pork, or beef inside, or even shrimp. It's entirely up to you. However, today I've decided to keep them vegetarian. You may have also noticed from the initial photo that the color of the spring rolls is a little bit lighter than what you might get from your normal Chinese takeout. This is because I pan-fried my spring rolls rather than deep-fried them. We're trying to keep things a bit healthier today. Anyway, we're julienning all of these vegetables, about 150 grams of cabbage, 50 grams of carrot, and 40 grams of mixed spring onion and leeks. I'm not too concerned about getting the cabbage too small because cabbage does shrink when you cook it. However, for the carrots, we will get them a little bit smaller because carrots tend to retain the same size. And for the spring onions and leeks, well, those are pretty easy to julienne, as you can see. There are many spring onion recipes here, spring roll recipes here on YouTube, which you can watch if you would like to add other ingredients, add meat, or even just watch people make spring rolls with already made pastry. That's probably going to be more exciting to watch. We'll also prepare some sweet potato noodles because I have them. Now these sweet potato noodles are pretty damn hard, and I gotta use my knife to bash them like this. However, I would really suggest that instead you soak the noodles first in some warm water, and when they're flexible, use scissors to cut them. That's probably going to be much easier. A little bit more water to fully soak the noodles and let them sit for about 15 minutes. We'll heat up a non-stick wok, and I ran out of sunflower oil when making this video, which is what I normally use, so we're going to use olive oil today. We don't need too much, just about a tablespoon. Heat it up slightly, and we'll add in the cabbage and carrots. Again, I'm using a smaller quantity of oil today so that we can keep things a bit healthier. Spring rolls are traditionally pretty unhealthy, but with a handmade pastry and keeping it vegetarian with minimal oil use, I think it's a little bit less of an indulgence. Add in your soaked sweet potato noodles. Rice vermicelli can also be used. And we'll just stir fry everything together. You'll notice that I'm avoiding high heat because this is a non-stick pan. I don't want to burn the coating off of it. We'll add in some seasoning. I've kept it extremely simple. Just some salt, sugar, white pepper, and chicken powder, each about a half teaspoon. We'll drizzle in about a tablespoon of light soy sauce. Turn up the heat a little bit so that the alcohol can evaporate. And then I added the spring onions and leeks. Now, I'm making these spring rolls as a request for some friend that I know, and also because I thought it would be a good experience to try and make everything from scratch. Every Chinese New Year, my grandmother would make spring rolls for us too. However, it turns out that she also uses the pre-made stuff, because rolling out your own pastry is really not fun, as you're about to see. I've taken my ball and I've divided it into 3 pieces. Now, I'm going to just demonstrate the technique that was supposed to work, but it didn't quite work as well for me. We're gonna just flatten each ball of dough, divide it into 4 portions, And then we're gonna roll those into little layers and then stack them on top of each other using oil to keep them separate. I'll also talk about the purpose of using all-purpose flour and cornstarch in that ratio. We want some protein so that we can develop a nice chewiness to the dough, but we also don't want it to be too dense. So the cornstarch just offsets a little bit of that protein. Also, the high hydration ratio prevents the dough from becoming tough. Now, once we've divided it into about 12 equal balls, we'll put a little bit of sesame oil. And we'll use some sesame oil to just separate each layer of dough. We'll put 4 layers on each, making 3 little dough patties. Well, not so little, they're quite big actually. I want to re-emphasize that this is less of a tutorial video and more of my first time experience, so do not take this video as a world's best recipe by any means. Once I pressed it back together, we heat up the wok a little bit again. Keep it pretty dry, we don't need any oil in there. And then I'll lay in those little dough pancakes. Now, I suppose the purpose of this step was to increase the structural integrity of the dough, which it did. However, I think I left it in the pan a little bit too long, as you can see a little bit of browning on both sides. Now, because of the oil, you're supposed to be able to separate the layers again and roll each one out individually. However, that did not work out quite as well for me as it was supposed to. Sure, the middle layer was easy to pull off, but the layers in between, well, it was a bit of a struggle. Let me grab a rolling pin, and I'm going to roll out the dough. Now I've got all the rest of the dough and my knife in the way, so you'll notice that I moved those away pretty soon. You can use the standard tricks to keep the dough from sticking to your rolling pin or the cutting board, like adding flour or oil or any of the sort. Now, I decided to just use a knife to cut around my dough and reshape it and stick it back in places such that I get a semi-perfect square. Although, really, it isn't going to be a perfect square by any means. Several rounds of rolling out the dough. Fortunately for me, the hydration ratio was just about perfect. If there was any more water in this dough, it would definitely stick to the cutting board. So after doing my best to roll out a square and cutting away the excess, we've got ourselves a spring roll wrapper that's made from scratch. This is significantly thicker than the pre-made ones you can buy, so it's not as light. However, I think that the chewy texture of the dough is pretty nice. We'll add a nice hefty tablespoon of filling to each one. By the way, this wrapper is about 5.5 inches or about 14 centimeters across. You can make some bigger spring rolls if you want to. Now, we'll offset the filling to one side and we'll roll up the tip like that. Roll it over the filling, and then we'll push both corners to the center, and then we'll roll it all up so that we can tighten it. If the dough is too moist or the filling is too moist, the dough will actually break open, which is not so great. But that's how you roll up a spring roll, a small one anyway. And I ended up doing 10 of these, based on the amount of filling I've got. I had a little bit less filling than I actually had for dough, and there you go. Alright, it's time to fry. Again, we're keeping it healthy today, so instead of deep frying, I'm going to shallow fry them in a little bit of olive oil, and I'm going to avoid using high heat because olive oil burns at high heat, and also because this is a non-stick pan. Using chopsticks, I just carefully tilt each one, making sure it's not sticking, although that really shouldn't happen in the first place, and also to make sure that it heats evenly. With the help of a spatula, I turn each piece over so that we can get some even browning on all sides. Add a little bit more oil because it's getting a bit dry. And we'll gently sear it all over. You may also notice that there are some dark spots around the spring rolls. This is an indication of a little bit more moisture than was supposed to be present in the filling or in the dough. So again, I'm taking this as a learning experience. You might see in the reflection that there's some lettuce on the plate. I just put that there to drain the oil, but I removed the lettuce at the end of the cooking because it got in the way. So that was my first attempt at spring rolls. By no means perfect, but it was a good learning experience, and I hope it is for you too. And I'll see you in the next one.